So today's video we're going to be refinishing this drop leaf table that I got for free off of a social media marketplace. So the table itself is in good shape. You can see there are lots of deep scratches. This one right here I didn't mess with too much, but I liked leaving a lot of the dings. I got rid of the big scratches and kind of kept it where it looked relatively new on top. And underneath you can see there's the supports for it where there's just a little screw to keep it from coming all the way out. So you just pull it straight back. There's no gears or anything on this one like some of the newer tables. And then you can see there's some white paint underneath and on the supports where the previous owner had painted it and then just let the paint kind of go where it wanted. So the first step we had, just flip it over and then get all the screws taken out. But be careful when you do a drop leaf table that you don't pinch your fingers in between the different segments. Excuse me. So we took all the screws out. They were a good bit more than we expected, but not a problem. And once you get the apron parts, a little bit of the paint had it together. So we pulled it, and now you get a better idea of all the extra paint that was sitting around. So here I recruited my helper to let him do a good bit of the heavy lifting on the kind of grunt work of getting rid of all this extra paint. So we scraped it away, and you can see it just leaves bare wood, so we'll have to address that later. But I like doing all this kind of dirty work in the garage. That way, just pull out the leaf blower and blow all the sawdust and all the chunks and all the pieces just straight out into the yard, instead of the basement where I have to vacuum it and be more concerned with the face mask and all that stuff for the dust. So here the helper went in and he smoothed out all the rough sections from where we were scraping the top, and then I scraped off the extra paint on the supports. So it worked really well. It's much more enjoyable to have somebody helping you out on this kind of stuff. Then we tried a wire wheel to get all the stain and old varnish off of the hinges, which it didn't work. That stuff was on there a lot harder than I thought because this is a stiff bristled wire wheel. So we took the same scraper and just went to each of the hinges and got rid of all the residue. And then on the bottom side, what was surprising is there's actually some rust where the wire wheel did fine for that. But I guess it's condensation, spilled water, and all the stuff from just dinner and drinks over the years that kind of ate into that a little bit. So after it was taken apart, took the top and then started with 60 grit sandpaper and just went over, which took a long time. We probably should have gone with 40 grit, but I took what I had on hand. So while he was using the orbital sander, I just went around the edges by hand and got the excess. So after a while, we figured we had a little bit of stripper left over from a prior project and we'd give it a shot, and it did not work for us. That's kind of disappointing. So we got it all spread out, what we had left, and you can see when I scrape it, it looks like it's going to do a decent job, but there was still a lot deep in the wood, so I had to go back to sanding, and then because I put the stripper on here, I ended up gumming up my sandpaper, so that's not enjoyable, and then ends up taking more time and more sandpaper. But while that stripper was drying, just went over to the apron. And here's where I like farms, like the kind of look here where it's distressed. Farmhouse, I think is the word I was looking for. But nonetheless, scuff up the edges so that way, that's the great news of this kind of furniture when you do it with this finish. If you hit it with a vacuum cleaner or you just drop something on it, kick it, your kids run into it, the dog hits it, whatever, you don't get your feelings hurt too badly because it's not a really nice polished up finish. It's intentionally looking distressed like this, so I like the look. And here it's just really light passing of it. Didn't go wild on it, just most on the edges more than anything. So as you can see, we used a lot of sandpaper, and you can see where it gummed up on the ones on the right side. So after all that part was taken care of, took some mineral spirits and cleaned off the wood while we were still in the garage, and once that had dried, went down into the basement. That way, cleaner environment, don't have to worry about any kind of leaves or anything else in the garage landing on top of any finish that I put on here. So again, when you sand things down to the natural wood, just remember that you're going to soak up a ton of stain. That wood is really dry once you get all the finish off of it. So here it took a good half can to get these 3 pieces stained. From there I went with heavy use polyurethane on the first 2 coats, sanded in between each one, and then ended up actually using what was left in this entire can, which was, again, kind of a bummer. So I did go out and buy another can, and that one worked out fine, putting it on top of it. 2 different manufacturers, but it didn't seem to have any consequences for me. So again, sanding in between each coat, and it left a nice finish. And then while those are drying, went over, got some polyacrylic, stir it up, don't shake it, and went over the painted surfaces. So again, polyacrylic for me, I like to use better on painted surfaces than I do polyurethane, just personal preference. So this stuff goes on really thin. You can barely see when it's on there. You just have to look in the light and see where it looks wet versus dry. So you put it on really thin, otherwise it will run pretty quickly on you. So after it dried, just took some 320 grit sandpaper, got rid of any of the rough spots or bubbles that may have shown up, and then did 2 more coats. So 3 coats total of this, 3 coats total of the polyurethane. So once these all dried, you can flip it over, you'll see the spots that have the bare wood from where we scraped it earlier. There's the mascot. So once we get flipped over, took the scraper, and there are a couple of spots where the polyurethane left little drops on the bottom, just overflow, which comes off really easily. So scrape that off and then wiped it down. Once it was good, then just went over with the stain to finish all the bare spots. I didn't do any kind of polyurethane or finish on the bottom. I just wanted to make sure that it was closer to all being one color. So here we went on to put the apron down, got it lined up, and then started putting in screws. And some of you may have already noticed that we're forgetting something at this point, but we didn't notice till after we were halfway done with the screws.
I'm pushing, but it's not going down.
And we used a screwdriver versus the hammer drill or screw gun. That way we didn't strip the heads because they're flathead screws. But here's what we forgot. We forgot to put the supports in, which you have to do because otherwise you have to take the little screw out and the supports, which we didn't want to do. And this one was kind of finicky and didn't want to go through easily, so I took the ones that went easily and gave him the one that was stiff and had a hard time going through. It's kind of a dirty trick, but it is what it is. So to make that support that was sticking go a little more easily, we just lathered it up with some furniture wax on all the sides of it. You can see the first time you have to hammer it back, but we did this a few times and it slowly got a little smoother, I guess I should say. And it glides a little bit better. So once all that was ready, just put the leaves back on, or leaves, I'm not sure which way you're supposed to say it. But this is the finished look. The distressed legs and the top, it's a satin polyurethane, so it's got a nice sheen to it, but at the same time it's not a really glossy look, because you don't get too glossy on the finish and then have a distressed apron to it. But underneath you can see all the white paint that was on the bottom is gone. It's almost uniform, close enough, since not too many people are going to be looking at the bottom of it. And then this leaf on the far side, it is darker than the other two. I'm not sure why, but it's not quite as drastic in person as it looks on film. But overall, it's still got character to it. I didn't completely get rid of all the dings, but got rid of the big scratches. So here are a couple of pictures so you can see what it looks like. But thanks for watching, and hopefully you guys like the finished product. Not bad for a free project and just a couple of weekends worth of work.